In the desert village of Keret Jezer, where the sun scorched the earth and shadows dared not linger, lived a girl whom the people feared to name. Her name was Nafre, an orphan child born during a solar eclipse, her mother dying moments after birth. That alone was enough to mark her. In a land where signs and omens meant more than truth, Nafre became the village's silent curse. Whispers surrounded her like flies. Witch, they said, the cursed child and daughter of death. Though she had never harmed anyone, misfortune clung to her like the sand in her clothes. When a drought came, they said she cursed the skies. When a child fell ill, they swore her glance had done it. She lived on the village's edge, in a clay hut barely standing, alone and forgotten. Her only inheritance was her mother's knowledge of herbs and healing, which she used to tend minor wounds and fevers. But kindness could not wash away the fear etched into the villagers' hearts. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, a terrible scream echoed from the river. It was Tepa, the high priest's nephew, writhing in pain, his mouth foaming, his body convulsing. No one knew what had happened, but someone muttered they had seen Nafre nearby, collecting lotus roots. That was enough. Rage ignited. By nightfall, a mob had gathered, torches in hand, faces twisted by fear and fury. They dragged Nafre from her hut, accusing her of cursing the priest's blood. She cried, begged, pleaded her innocence, but no one listened. They hurled her into the old granary, sealed the door, and announced she would be judged by the temple court in 3 days. But the people had already passed their judgment. Death by fire, they whispered, would cleanse her soul. Far away, in a quiet stone dwelling near the cliffs, an old man stirred. Menmaatre, once healer to queens, now a recluse, heard the tale of the cursed orphan. He said nothing. He only gathered his herbs, mounted his donkey, and began the long journey to Keret Jezer. The gods may have turned their backs on Nafre, but Menmaatre had not. Somewhere deep in his bones, the truth called to him, and he would answer. The path to Keret Jezer wound through salt-scorched plains and wind-swept valleys, a desolate stretch of ancient earth where whispers of gods and ghosts floated through the air. Menmaatre rode in silence, his mind weighed with memory and intuition. Years ago, he had stood in the House of Life beside royal physicians, watching over the breath of queens and princes. But power bred envy, and court politics turned his knowledge into threat. Exiled in his twilight years, he had chosen solitude. Still, the healer within him never died. When the news came a child accused of witchcraft, a village hungry for blood struck a nerve older than memory. He had seen this before. Ignorance, dressed in the robes of righteousness, fear, painted as justice. He could not let another innocent fall to fire. As the village neared, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that crawled across the sand like silent judges. Keret Jezer had changed little in the years since he had last passed through it. Mud brick homes clung to the hillside, goats bleated in the distance, and at its center stood the temple the village's beating heart and watchful eye. Menmaatre dismounted outside the healer's hut, an empty place once kept by Nafre's mother. He looked around and saw signs of struggle, scorched footprints, and broken herbs. The villagers glanced at him, unsure whether to greet or fear him. His face was unfamiliar to most, his presence unsettling. Yet none dared question a man dressed in linen, dyed with royal indigo, and carrying the satchel of a sacred craft. He asked for the girl. "No one may see the witch," came the sharp reply from a temple guard, a boy no older than 17 with fear in his eyes. "I am not here to see a witch," Menmaatre said calmly. "I am here to see a patient." The guard refused again, but Menmaatre stood firm. Finally, a whisper passed among the elders. "Let the old man see her. If she dies, so be it. If she lives, perhaps the gods have not cursed her after all." And so, under the watch of the skeptical and the scornful, Menmaatre was led to the granary. Inside, behind a wall of old sacks and dried grain, lay Nafre chained, bruised, and broken, yet with fire still in her eyes. The healer stepped forward, knelt beside her, and took her trembling hand. "I believe you," he whispered. Nafre blinked through the darkness, unsure whether the voice had come from dream or mercy. Her body ached, her wrists raw from the ropes, her throat dry and cracked. But the man before her, his eyes were kind, too kind for this place. Menmaatre unwrapped a linen cloth from his satchel and gently wiped the dirt and blood from her face. He did not flinch at the bruises or the swollen lip. Instead, he observed in silence, as a true healer does, letting her breathe in his presence. "They say you poisoned the boy," he said softly, not as an accusation, but a statement she could respond to. Nafre's eyes welled with tears. "I only gathered lotus root. My mother used it for fevers. That's all I did." Menmaatre nodded, already knowing the answer. The symptoms described convulsions. Frothing at the mouth didn't match lotus root poisoning. Something else was at work. He asked to see the herb she had gathered. "They took everything," she whispered. "Burned it." His brow furrowed. Ignorance always burned what it feared. He stood and knocked on the granary door. "Bring me fresh lotus root," he commanded the guard. "And poppy, I will show you what poison truly is." The guard hesitated, but the weight of Menmaatre's name, even if forgotten by most, still held power. Reluctantly, the herbs were brought. Menmaatre crushed a small piece of lotus and offered it to the guard. "Eat," the guard recoiled. "You want me to be cursed too?" Menmaatre rolled his eyes. He bit the root himself, chewed, swallowed, then stood perfectly still. No poison, no death, only fear. He turned back to Nafre, who watched with wonder. No one had ever defended her. No one had dared. That night, he remained in the granary with her, tending her wounds, massaging her sore limbs, sharing water and bread. He listened to her story, not just of the accusation, but of her life, of how her mother once healed the same villagers now calling for her death, of how kindness faded after her mother died, replaced by whispers and stares. Menmaatre understood. Fear was louder than truth, in places ruled by silence. Outside, the village stirred with rumors. Why had the healer stayed with the girl? Why had he not cursed her? Why had he eaten her herbs and lived? The next morning, as the sun broke over the dunes, the people would begin to question the story they'd written. The third day dawned with an eerie stillness. In Pre-Islamic, silence never meant peace. It meant something was about to break. Villagers gathered near the temple courtyard, their faces shaded by linen hoods and suspicion. The trial of Nafre, the cursed orphan, was to begin. She was led out of the granary, hands bound, bruises fading beneath Menmaatre's care but still visible. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for mercy, but found only firelight reflected in hardened gazes. The high priest stood tall, dressed in ivory robes, a golden scarab pendant glinting at his chest. Beside him, Tepathe boy she was accused of cursing sat slumped, pale but breathing. The priest raised his arms to the sky. "We gather in Ma'at's name," he declared, invoking the goddess of truth and justice, "to judge the one who has brought evil to our village." Menmaatre stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "You invoke Ma'at, yet blind yourselves to her essence. Truth is not found in fear, nor in torches, nor in the cries of a frightened mob." The crowd murmured. The priest's eyes narrowed. "You defend a witch?" "I defend a healer's daughter," Menmaatre replied. He stepped beside Nafre, drawing a small bundle of herbs from his satchel. "She is guilty only of knowledge, passed from her mother, who once cured your fevers and tended your wounds. Have you forgotten?" He pointed to Tepa. "What afflicted the boy was no curset, was fish bladder rot, a poisoning common in low waters during heat. He produced a dried bladder from a clay jar. Smell this." The elders recoiled at the stench. "The boy's symptoms match this, not lotus or poppy. She is innocent." The high priest's lips curled. "You claim wisdom above the gods?" "No," Menmaatre said, stepping closer. "I honor the gods with truth." For a moment, silence. Then, murmurs. Doubt crept into the crowd. A mother remembered when Nafre's mother saved her child. A farmer recalled how the girl gave him bark tea for his cough. But fear dies slowly. The priest banged his staff. "We shall test her in fire. If the gods protect her, she lives." The fire pit was prepared. Menmaatre turned to Nafre. "Do you trust me?" She nodded, terrified, but resolute. As the flames rose, the true trial began not just for Nafre, but for the soul of the village. The crowd formed a ring around the fire pit, eyes wide with anticipation, fear, and something darker curiosity. The flames licked the desert air, twisting upward like the tongues of angry gods. Nafre stood at its edge, her ankles unbound, yet the invisible chains of judgment held her tighter than any rope. The high priest raised his arms, calling to the sky, invoking the gods of flame and fate. "If she speaks truth," he bellowed, "the fire will not claim her. If she lies, the gods will take her soul." Menmaatre stepped beside her, his voice low. "Walk steady. Count each breath. Fear feeds flame. Truth calms it." Nafre swallowed hard. Her legs trembled. All eyes were on her waiting. Hoping, perhaps, that she would stumble, scream, burn. That would be easier to believe than a lie they had lived with for so long. The priest gestured, and Nafre stepped forward. Her bare feet touched the edge of hot stone, the fire's heat curling around her like a beast sniffing its prey. She closed her eyes and stepped in. Gasps rang out. A child cried. The flames danced around her, curling near but never touching. She walked slowly, each step deliberate, as if Ma'at herself guided her path. Menmaatre whispered prayers under his breath, not to the gods, but to the spirit of reason may it prevail. Nafre crossed to the other side, her skin untouched, her breath steady. Silence fell. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, an elder, one who had suffered fever years ago and been healed by Nafre's mother, stepped forward. "She bears no mark," he said. "The gods have spoken." Others murmured in agreement. The fear that once fueled their hatred began to flicker, unsure of its place. The high priest's face darkened. "This proves nothing. Fire is not the only test." But the crowd was shifting. Truth was louder now. The spell of hysteria was breaking. Menmaatre raised his voice. "If Ma'at demands more, let her speak through your hearts, not your hate." The priest, sensing the change, withdrew. Let the council decide. That night, Nafre returned to the granary, not as a prisoner, but as a mystery. Some called her blessed. Others still whispered, "Witch." But now the village was divided. And in the shadows of the temple, someone watched. Not everyone was ready to let her go. That night, Pre-Islamic did not sleep. The air was thick with murmurs and divided loyalties. Some villagers left offerings outside Nafre's hut, unsure whether to beg her blessing or forgiveness. Others clutched amulets tighter, praying she wouldn't curse them in her dreams. In the granary, Nafre lay awake, listening to the shifting winds and the slow, even breathing of Menmaatre beside her. "Why did they hate me so easily?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Menmaatre didn't answer at first. He stared at the ceiling, where moonlight carved lines across the dried beams. Because fear is easier than understanding, and truth is a threat to those who control the lie. The next morning, before dawn, Menmaatre rose early. He needed answers. Tepa's symptoms still gnawed at his mind. Fish bladder rot was deadly, but rare. And he tasted none of it in the village's food or water. Something was wrong. He made his way to the priest's storage hut near the temple, a place he had once entered freely in another life. Now, he slipped inside like a shadow. Inside he found rows of herbs, dried roots, incense, and a sealed clay jar bearing a symbol he hadn't seen in years. A scorpion etched in red. "Hemset root," he muttered. A powerful toxin, banned in most temples, used by priesthoods not to heal but to silence. As he examined the contents, a rustling behind him made him turn. A young acolyte stood in the doorway, eyes wide. "You shouldn't be here," the boy said. Menmaatre approached slowly. "You saw what happened to the boy, didn't you?" The acolyte hesitated, then nodded. "He drank from the priest's cup. It wasn't meant for him. It was meant for the merchant, the one who challenged the temple's tithe." Menmaatre's breath caught. This wasn't just ignorance. It was conspiracy. Back at the granary, Nafre sorted through a small bundle of herbs brought by a kind villager. She looked up as Menmaatre returned, his face tight with resolve. "You were never the danger, but someone wanted you to be." Nafre's heart pounded. "Why?" "Because you were easy to blame, and they needed the crowd to look away." The healer knew now they weren't fighting superstition. They were challenging power, and power, when exposed, would do anything to protect itself. As the sun climbed above the sandstone cliffs, its golden rays washed over Pre-Islamic like a spotlight on a stage not yet cleared. Menmaatre stood at the center of it now, burdened not only with truth but with a decision how much to reveal, and to whom. The temple held the village's loyalty like a clenched fist, Exposing its rot could shatter more than just illusions. Still, he knew silence was no longer an option. He returned to the council hall that afternoon, where the elders gathered beneath the eye of Horus carved into the stone ceiling. They expected a plea for mercy, perhaps a request for leniency. Instead, Menmaatre laid the scorpion-marked jar before them. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Some elders leaned in, squinting. Others leaned back. "Hemset root," he continued. "A poison outlawed by royal decree. Found not in Nafre's hands, but in the high priest's private stores." Gasps rippled. One elder muttered a prayer. "Lies," the high priest said from the shadows of the hall, stepping forward. "This is blasphemy. You speak against the gods." "No," Menmaatre replied, voice steady. "I speak against a man hiding behind them." The room fell silent. The high priest's face shifted, but he masked his panic well. "You come here after years in exile, and now you expect us to believe you over the divine voice of this village?" Menmaatre didn't flinch. "Then let the divine prove itself. Ask the acolyte." Gasps rose again as the young boy entered, trembling. He bowed and spoke. "I saw it. The priest prepared the cup meant for the merchant. Tepa drank it by mistake. Pandemonium broke out. Elders shouted. Others stood in shock. The high priest snarled, grabbed the jar, and smashed it against the floor. "You dare challenge the gods?" he bellowed. "No," said Menmaatre, standing tall. "I restore what they stand for." Guards hesitated. The crowd, having gathered outside, pushed into the hall. Whispers flew like falconstruth, cracking the stone walls of power. The elders called for the king's representative to be summoned. That night, the temple doors were shut and sealed. The high priest disappeared into its depths. In the shadows of his hut, Menmaatre turned to Nafre. "They won't let this go quietly." Nafre met his gaze. Fear behind her eyes, but something stronger too. "Then neither will we." Night fell heavy over Keret Jesser, as though the gods themselves had drawn their veils across the stars. The temple's great doors remained sealed, guarded by men loyal not to justice but to fear. Within its high stone walls, the high priest moved like a trapped scorpion, dangerous and desperate. He knew the truth had begun to bloom in the hearts of the people, and once doubt took root, no decree or curse could fully silence it. Still, he had ruled too long, and would not yield without striking back. In a small chamber behind the sanctum, the high priest stood before an obsidian shrine. He whispered ancient incantations, ones no longer spoken by the temple scholars, and dipped a reed pen into dark ink. On parchment made of woven papyrus, he wrote a name Nafre beneath it, a symbol of binding. He folded the curse scroll carefully and placed it into a clay jar, sealing it with wax and ash. "Let your tongue rot in silence," he hissed. "Let your body fade with shadow." But shadows, once loyal, were shifting. Back at the granary, Nafre stirred restlessly. Her breath caught in her chest as a sudden cold washed over her. Her voice faltered when she tried to call for Menmaatre. Her limbs trembled. The healer rushed to her side, saw the graying of her fingertips, the dark veins rising beneath her skin. "A binding curse," he murmured. "Old magic. Forbidden." He rummaged through his satchel, then crushed lotus, mandrake, and white sage into a bitter paste. "You must fight it," he told her, placing the mixture on her chest. This magic feeds on fear. Nafre tried to speak, but no words came, only tears. Menmaatre lit incense, murmuring counterspells he had not spoken in decades. The smoke curled around her like a shield. Outside, the villagers gathered again, drawn by something they could not name. And then, from within the granary, a sound, Nafre's voice, small but steady, breaking through the curse. Menmaatre exhaled in relief. "She speaks." The people outside fell quiet. Something was changing. Inside the temple, the high priest felt the curse fail. His hand shook. His fear deepened. He knew note was not enough to silence her. If he wanted to stop Nafre, he would have to kill her. Dawn broke like a blade, slicing through the haze that had settled over Pre-Islamic for far too long. The villagers awoke to a strange feeling, not fear, not exactly, but tension. As though something buried deep beneath the sand was finally beginning to stir. Rumors had spread like wildfire throughout the night. The high priest had tried to curse the girl. The healer had broken it. And now, a royal messenger was on his way. Inside the granary, Nafre sat propped against a wall, color slowly returning to her cheeks. Menmaatre placed a cooling cloth on her forehead, relief etched in the lines of his face. "You fought it," he whispered. "That curse was ancient. It should have silenced you forever." Nafre gave a faint smile. "He underestimated me. They always do." Menmaatre nodded. "He feared your truth. And now he fears the ears that might finally hear it." As the sun reached its zenith, a horn sounded from the northern pass. A caravan of royal guards, clad in lapis and bronze, descended upon the village. At its center rode Nafre, a scribe of Pharaoh and enforcer of Ma'at. The villagers parted in silence as he dismounted, scrolls clutched in one hand, judgment in the other. "Where is the high priest of Pre-Islamic?" he asked. Menmaatre stepped forward. "Within the temple, refusing to answer for his crimes." Nafre turned to his guards. "Then we dragged truth from behind stone." The temple doors, sealed for days, cracked open under the strength of the soldiers. They poured in, torches lit. Within minutes, they found the high priest in his sanctum, muttering prayers that turned to curses as he was seized. "Blasphemers!" he screamed. "The gods will smite you all." But Nafre raised a decree scroll. "You are accused of murder by poison, unlawful use of forbidden spells, and the attempted sacrifice of an innocent." The priest's eyes darted. "She is a witch," he roared, pointing toward Nafre. "She deceived you all." Nafre looked to Nafre, then to Menmaatre. "Then let her stand with us while we read Ma'at's judgment. If she is a witch, let her cower. If she is truth, let her speak." And so Nafre stood in the courtyard before the people who once wished her dead. Her voice did not shake. "My name is Nafre, daughter of a healer, born under the sun's silence. I am not your curse. I am your cure." The courtyard of Pre-Islamic stood hushed, every breath held as Nafre's voice echoed off the temple walls. The girl once branded a witch now faced her accuser with the calm certainty of truth. The royal scribe Nafre turned to the villagers, his expression unreadable, then raised the decree scroll. "By order of the Pharaoh's seal, the high priest is stripped of his position, his titles, and his protection. His crimes against the laws of Ma'at are undeniable. Guards dragged the priest forward. He thrashed like a beast, shrieking curses, but no one moved to stop them. The same crowd that once cheered for Nafre's punishment now stared in silence, many ashamed, others stunned. Some wept. "Let him be taken to Wasit," Nesuta continued. "There he will stand trial before Pharaoh's court. There will be no fire, only truth." Menmaatre stepped forward beside Nafre. His shoulders were tired, his eyes heavy, but in that moment, he looked 10 years younger. "Let this be the end of fear," he said, "and the beginning of remembering who we are meant to be." Later that day, as the royal banners faded into the horizon and the dust settled over Keret Jezer, the villagers began to rebuild, not with bricks but with understanding. Mothers brought offerings of grain and honey to Nafre's hut. Children peeked in with shy smiles. The same elders who once turned their backs now came seeking guidance. She met each one with grace, never bitter, never angry. In time, Menmaatre passed on his satchel, his books, and his secrets to Nafre. "You are more than a healer," he told her. "You are a voice that cuts through silence." Years later, tales of the orphan girl who defied fire, curses, and hatred would reach temples far beyond the desert's edge. They would speak her name in reverence. Nafre, the one who walked through flame and healed a village poisoned by fear. She never sought revenge, only truth. And truth, once feared, became her power. Thus ends the tale of the orphan once branded a witch and the healer who believed her. May it remind all who hear it that sometimes the gods speak loudest through those the world refuses to hear. And so, the story of Nafrean orphan cast aside, accused, and nearly destroyed comes to an end. But what truly ended was not just the cruelty of one priest or the silence of one village. It was the end of ignorance disguised as tradition, and the beginning of healing led by truth. Through the eyes of an outcast and the wisdom of an old healer, we are reminded that courage isn't always loud, and justice doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes it lives in the quiet heart of a girl who refuses to break, and in the of someone who dares to believe her. Now we turn to you. What did you learn from Nafre's journey? Did any part of this story reflect something real from our world today? Would you have trusted her or feared her? Let us know in the comments below. Your voice matters just like hers did. HC. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more ancient tales that still speak to the soul. Thank you for watching.